All right, well, I know that everybody is up checking out and doing all of those things, so there's going to be a continuous flow back in here. So we'll start with the least important things, which is me, and then we'll get to the cool stuff, which is Stacey. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see to be a challenge in the DIR model and how we've chosen to address it, at least part of it, at the Rebecca School. So I promised that I would never do a presentation about DIR where I didn't show a picture of Dr. Greenspan, so here he is, looking lovely, being kind to a child, and he supervised us at Rebecca School for 5 years and was really tough on us for 5 years. He was delightful and charming and wonderful when there was a child there. He was caring, kind, considerate when there was a parent there, really kind to parents, kind to children, and he was a son of a gun with therapists. And he raked us over the coals whenever he possibly could. He was a tough, tough guy, but it made the school what it is. We wrote a book together about the school and about 16 different kids. It's called Respecting Autism. It's for sale out there at the ICDL bookstore. And through our years of work together, we really came to understand what Dr. Greenspan's meanings for various pieces of the model were. But we would get to functional emotional developmental capacity 4, and you can see here that I've highlighted 4 and 5. And the reason why I highlighted those capacities is because I think that a lot of what we call the challenges for folks on the autism spectrum are right there, right in that leap between 4 and 5. And Dr. Greenspan's functional emotional developmental capacity 4 implies a lot of things. But the thing that it really implies is that you have to be in a continuous flow with somebody around something emotionally meaningful where you are using each other as a way to get that thing accomplished. That seems to imply that you have a way of communicating. And for some of our kids, you heard yesterday, communicating is difficult, and some of the augmentative communication systems or the different more mechanical ways of pointing at words or doing a picture exchange don't lead to that. Very difficult to talk about those things. So there's the challenge, right? How do you work with kids who have really challenged communications in a way that is emotionally meaningful, in a continuous flow, opening and closing 60 circles around something that you actually want to accomplish? How do you do that? It's a real challenge. I know that you run into this in your work. How do you get a kid at functional emotional developmental capacity 3 who has real challenges in understanding or in his ability to express? How do you get that kid in a continuous flow around an emotionally meaningful topic where both of you are thinking about the other one and using each other to accomplish that thing? That's really what's implied in functional emotional developmental capacity 4. So that's the challenge. And here's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, how we've addressed that. So for us, the challenge is continuous flow. How do you get in a continuous flow? And you know what a continuous flow is. You've been in them. You stand at a cocktail party, time passes like this, you're really enjoying it, that's a continuous flow. If you're really dragging and you're looking at your watch and you're trying to get away from something, that's not a continuous flow. So you've experienced it. How do we get the kids in that? It has to be emotionally meaningful. This has to be something you actively care about and are trying to do and are trying to solve together with some emotion. Devin, very eloquently talked about the role of emotion. It has to be a mutual thing. You have to both have agreed to it. You have to both sign on to it and say, okay, I'll work with your idea now, you work with my idea, we'll work back and forth. And how do you do that with little or no language? So I think there's a real prejudice in the DIR world, and probably in the intervention world entirely, toward wanting to work with really beautiful... Hey, CJ. That was amazing. Wanting to work with really charming, beautiful little cherubs and be able to go boo, 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 boo to them. And then they just want to go back to boo, 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 boo. Little kids, little guys who are delightful. We like that early intervention. We just love those little delicious things. And I think there's a real prejudice in that direction. And I know that in New York, when we opened the school, there really weren't places for the kids once they began to hit puberty in the private school world. People universally did not want to work with more challenging kids who had become adolescents. So that's the challenge. How do you get that work done? So let me show you a really lovely, delightful little boy. You'll want to work with him, I'm warning you. This is the intake video for a kid at the Rebecca School. His name is Avi, and just want to show you a couple minutes. I got it. No.
It's green?
There's not any talking going on, so don't worry anyways. Just plug me in. It's going to be loud. Isn't he sweet? So who amongst you wouldn't be willing to work with that kid? He is just a sweet little boy. He can do all of the things that you would want a kid to do. In DIR, you could go back and forth with him. And who wouldn't want to work with him? So the problem is that once you grow up and you're 6'2", and he is, and you weigh 250 pounds, and he does, and you're built like an interior lineman, a football interior lineman, lots of strength, and you're 20 years old, then what do you do with him? You're not going to pick him up. You're not cuddling him. He's sexually mature. He's physically bigger and stronger than anybody in the room. If he wanted to, and he's a delightful soul, but if he wanted to, he could move you in any direction he wanted you to move. So he has challenges in communication and challenges in understanding. So how do you then create the emotionally meaningful back and forth conversation in a continuous flow when you don't have the language, you don't have the communication device, you don't have any of the stuff that you would want? How do you do that? Well, so for us, the answer has been we do it at least partially and some of the time in music therapy. And we're not talking about all music therapy. We are talking about a very specific kind of music therapy. We're talking about interactive, improvisational music therapists who can get in and probably Nordhoff Robbins trained. At Rebecca, they all are. I'm right about that, right? Partially. Partially right. But all interactive. And continuous flow comes from the emotionally meaningful conversation that evolves. Because one of the beautiful things that I have learned in my association with music therapists and being a member of the American Music Therapy Association, I'm a singularly unmusical member of the American Music Therapy Association. What I have learned is that when other processes are challenged, music is still there. And these guys call it the music child. The music child is still there. Even when other processes are really challenged, music is still there. Musicking is still there, and the ability to understand that. And music wasn't created by musicians. Music existed because it evolved in human beings. And musicians figured out how to create that thing, but it already existed. And so it exists entirely independent of other stuff that might break down. So when you want to have an emotional conversation, music is one way to do it. It is not, as I have said a million times, it is not an analog for communication. It is, in fact, an emotionally laden communication. It is communication. So when you have a 6'2", 250-pound 20-year-old, and you need to get him in a continuous flow, and it needs to be emotional, this is one way to do it. And if you don't want to physically hold him and rock him, because as you can see, most of the staff at the Rebecca School are women, and that would be a challenge. It would be a challenge because he's sexually mature. It would be a challenge because they couldn't physically do it if they wanted to. If you want to hold him emotionally, this way of holding, this musical way of holding, is one way to do it. Do you want to pick up? I told you the interesting part was coming now.
Music has the capacity to reach any human emotion. So think about it. Think about how music touches your own life, from the everyday to the specific life events. Think about the times that music has brought you to intense joy. Think about those times when you've put on a sad song because you need the permission to cry. And it's the music that supports you and allows you to release that feeling. It gives you the permission. Think about the song that you want to put on so you can dance around and clean your kitchen, or that song that gets you through your morning commute. Think about the times you've shared music with others, singing in a choir, jamming out with your friends in a car, maybe playing in a band or singing in a choir. Music is versatile. Hundreds of different styles of music, and lots of different specific expressive qualities that music has, from the melody line to a driving tempo, to a range of dynamics, syncopated, fun, rhythmic patterns. The vastness of music, from its simplest form to its most complex, has the capacity to reach us in many different ways and in many different circumstances. Music has the capacity to reach any human emotion. Now, I can't take credit for that. That was said by Clive Robbins, who is a music therapy pioneer and co-creator of Nordhoff Robbins music therapy. So now imagine you're in a therapy session, and maybe there's something that you're feeling, and you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to articulate or label that emotion or that feeling. Or perhaps there's actually no words that describe what you're feeling, but you so desperately want someone to understand what it feels like. Music has the capacity to reach any human emotion. So Clive Robbins, as I said, was the co-creator of Nordoff Robbins Music Therapy. He was a special educator in a Waldorf school, and he met composer Paul Nordoff, and when Paul was on sabbatical, and Paul played music for his students, and something magical happened. And Clive realized that music had this extreme potential to reach deep within the students he had, and they were reacting differently. They were responding to the world differently through this music that was offered to them. So after 50 years of cultivating this journey, or they spent 50 years cultivating this journey, and when Paul and Clive were trying to figure out how to theorize the core beliefs of their work, they created the concept of the music child that Gil mentioned. So the music child reaches that part that is not damaged, the essential core of our being. So the work of the therapist is to allow the music child, the very center and the spirit of the child, to emerge, to access parts of oneself that is or has become limited. So imagine this. Let's think a little bit developmentally. So imagine you're 15 months old and you're sitting at your high chair and you're really hungry. You're really, really, really hungry, and it's taking mommy a little bit to prepare your food, and you start to bang on your tray, and you start to vocalize your frustration, and the food's taking a little bit longer, and your banging gets harder, and your vocalizing gets louder. But now imagine you're 20 years old, and your way of dealing with these life's circumstances are to bang on the floor, or bang on the table, or on the wall, or on your forehead. There are days that something is stirred up within you and you have no idea how to take it. There's a scream in the hallway. The elevator's too crowded. The bus ride takes too long. And in these moments, there's no amount of external supports that are going to meet that emotional dysregulation. So you put in the trust of the therapeutic relationship. And the incredible facets of music. I believe there's a way. So here's Avi a couple years ago in a current picture. As Gil pointed out, 6'2", about 250 pounds, stocky built. He loves cooking. He loves to be outside. He loves talking about holidays, calendars. He loves putting objects in rainbow order. He loves math. And he struggles with the emotional piece on a daily basis. Sometimes it's clear what's preceding this, and sometimes it's not. So I want to show you a very short video, not in any way to disrespect Avi, but I just want to give you a tiny glimpse of how difficult and real these moments are for him. Just prior to coming to the quiet room, Avi stated that he was feeling sad. And we started to go down the hallway, and somebody started to scream, and he went in here. I asked him if I could bring a drum in, which I had done on a few other occasions on these kind of situations. And we have Charlie here, who's a TA, who's helping Avi through this.
You want more water?
No.
You sure? Sure. No. Not the walls. Sorry. Poor calls. Got to fix all that, okay? You can hit the mat.
Hit the mat, okay.
You want the drum?
No.
You can hit the drum, Marty. You can hit it as hard as you want.
As hard as you want.
You can hit the drum as hard as you want.
All right, no.
Squeeze this? You want to squeeze?
Always going to give you this. Squeeze in a pound, okay? I need a drink of water. You want some?
So now I'm going to show you a video of a day when Avi had some similar dysregulation, not to this intensity, but he was able to transition to the music room. At the start of the video, you're going to see how he is struggling with the sounds in the hallway. And he immediately states, all done with music, communicating to me like, this is going to be really tough for me to be here today. But we work through it.
Oh, the music.
We have a few minutes, Ori.
Yes.
What would you like to start with? You want something slow and quiet?
Yes.
You seem a little frustrated right now.
Oh, yeah.
Are you feeling frustrated?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Let's see if we can work through it. Meant to pause that.
Stacey's not going to toot her own horn here, but you have to watch how subtle and beautiful this is, right? That when he needs to feel calmer and is rocking, how the music picks up the beat, and how she supports him in the tonality of the music, and how she doesn't challenge him and instead is joining with him. It's really beautiful work, and it's really subtle, and I know that
I'm
it's
just going to pause it and talk about that.
she,
That's what I was trying to do.
I know. She gets uncomfortable tooting her own horn, but they're really beautiful work, and you have to watch it because it's subtle and it's precise. Okay, so now you can toot your own horn a little bit.
Well, let's see if we can pick up where we left off. You want something slow and... So I'm thinking in these moments, how do I provide this space for him with the music that's calming and allows him to not reach that dysregulation, but also gives him the permission to be upset and be frustrated? Sorry. Oops. This is what I get for embedding the videos. Slow and quiet?
Yes.
following his lead, there at the end, really opening up musical circles that he can close. So the beginning part was really holding him, helping co-regulate with him, and then following him as his intensity picked up with his movement and his vocalizations, and then offering him musical circles to close to make it more interactive. So in the work that we do at Rebecca's school, in the music therapy department, we're really using all different facets of music. So we're using the students' musical interests, we're using a wide range of musical styles, we're using a lot of musical affect, we're following their lead, we're using all this to really support and work in and with the music. So the process of music therapy sessions often include a huge variety of music experiences that not only meet in the moment, but also provide many different ways of being in music with another person. To invite them into the new experience, to show them a variety of ways to use their own innate musical strengths and discover new ones. So we'll introduce various styles of music and repertoire to evoke responses, to teach an interactive music concept, and also to signify emotional and therapeutic themes. So this is just a great example of using voice and us tuning in with voice and getting into this back and forth just on vocalizations. There we go. Whoops, sorry, I'm having a little difficulty with this PowerPoint. It's not the good one. There we go. Sing it with me. Oh, oh, e, ah, oh, ah, e, oh, e, ah, oh, e, ah, ah, hey, 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 hey. All done. All done. And I also want to give him the permission to use his voice in all these different ways. He loves to use his voice to scream, and I want to give him the opportunity to do this with somebody else that is listening to him and doing it with him, that it's okay to release your emotions like this. So as I mentioned earlier, he loves to talk about calendars and holidays and all of these things, and often he'll bring that into the session. And one day I just thought of the song My Favorite Things from The Sound of Music. And it's become a theme that we use quite a lot, and we use it in a lot of different ways. We elaborate it a lot, and I just wanted to show this. It's just so joyful when he requests this and we sing it together. So we all want to be connected, right? We want to feel connected. It's neurobiological. It's how we're wired. It's why we're here. Creative music therapy can provide a deep level of connection using music to recognize emotion and communicate to that person that you are with that it is essential. So in an earlier excerpt, you heard me singing about so many feelings inside, and this is a huge theme that we talk a lot about, sing a lot about. You know, often Avi will come in very excited to be there, but also bringing up a lot of other emotions. So we all have a lot of different feelings at once, right? You know, we can feel happy, we can feel sad, we can feel all of these things, and I can use musical themes and I can use the qualities of music to allow him to experience this range of emotions within our context of our relationship and get into that continuous flow that Gil was talking about. Let me show.
Inside of me, so many feelings inside of me.
Beautiful, right? So, see the difference? If you're emotionally dysregulated and you're smashing walls, that's a crisis, right? Here's a child who might potentially hurt himself or hurt someone else, and you have to respond to that. You can't let that just continue. And Charlie, in that previous clip, did what people do, which is, hey, do you want a glass of water? Do you want something? You know, how can I help you out of this? How can I help you stop feeling this? How can I help you get regulated again? But he's in the exact same state in these sessions. And we're not saying to him, stop that. Stop feeling that. Stop doing those things. What we're saying is, you have inner resources. I am here with you. And you're going to be able to tolerate this feeling because someday you need to be able to say to yourself, when I feel sad, I can live through that. And I will come out the other side of it. It's really difficult to challenge adults and children who are going to do something that could lead to people getting hurt or them getting hurt. It is very difficult to say to them, stay in this place. Almost impossible for us poor, challenged, language-based therapists. You know, I feel sorry for us in a lot of ways because it is very difficult for us to do this work. But to create the emotional space in which you can say to yourself, all right, the world seems pretty dismal. I have no evidence that things are going to get better, but there is a space here in which I can feel these things. There's a space here in which I can even be challenged a little bit around these things when you change the music and make it slightly more challenging for him. Continue to do the DIR work, which, as anybody who has seen me speak before, I speak about this sort of Brooklyn attitude that I've got. It's like, we're not about kids staying in a place. We're about moving them all the time. Well, how do you move a guy who might be potentially dangerous to himself in a more typical DIR way? It's challenging. And yet, Stacey's able to do it. So those two emotional states are the same emotional states, but this is the emotional state being cared for, supported, and the message is, you're going to be okay, but you're also really sad. And all of us feel that way. There was a speaker yesterday who said, you know, if we jump in every single time for a kid and help them out of the emotional state, they never learn about their own inner resources, and that's what he's got to have. It's beautiful work.
So music is that medium that individuals can feel and demonstrate wholeness. We are designed to respond to music and to make music. And individuals need to have access to this type of therapy and this type of mental health. I was looking back at an early Greenspan report that was from a case conference about Avi. And this is what Dr. Greenspan said. Overall, the key is to tune more into Avi's world. Get him into more conversational, not in terms of proper use of words and full sentences, but more back and forth rhythm with verbal and gestural interactions. Work on the pleasure of the relationships, which have already had a positive impact on him. So it has been and continues to be a really incredible journey with Avi. In our early therapy process, he had such a difficult time transitioning to the sessions. He would display an intense desire to come to the sessions, but it was really difficult. There were scooter boards involved. There were many other things involved. And many times by the time we got to the music room, there was very little time left. And at this time in our therapy process, I introduced a song to him that a dear colleague of mine, Connie Loretto from the Center for Discovery, wrote. And it's called Thank You for Sharing. And it was simply to say to him, thanks for this time. Thanks for making it here. And thanks for working so hard to get here. The song continues to be a very important way that we close our time together.
With me, thank you for sharing your time with me. We sang and we played your music today, and now it's time
To say.
to say goodbye. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Thank you for sharing your time with me. We sang and we played your music today, and now it's time to say thank you for sharing your time with me. Thank you for sharing your time with me.
No, mister.
To
That's it.
We wanted to leave a couple minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions, we would love to answer your questions. Sunny.
My question for Stacey, since you're the music therapist, after you work with your clients, for example with Avi, who was having intense emotional difficulty, how do you have your music therapy session, and when the session is over, how do you keep the client in that emotional, musical mindset when he returns to his non-musical activities? And I'm not just talking about Avi specifically, but anybody who is emotionally dysregulated, and the music regulates them emotionally, and you sing your goodbye song. How do you return them back to their non-musical activities and keep that same emotional state of mind?
So, Sunny, I know you asked Stacey, and she's going to answer you second, but I'm going to answer it first. There was a beautiful moment in that last video, and I actually was stunned by it. I started crying when I watched it last night, where he yawns, where Avi yawns. And for me, it seemed that he was saying, okay, I can let go of this beautiful thing, and know that tomorrow it will be here. It's the same process that we try to instill in all our children and in the kids that we work with, that bedtime thing where, okay, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to go to sleep, and tomorrow this beautiful world will still be here. It's a very difficult concept for people who are having trouble with abstraction. And so to be able to relax yourself and say, this thing that I care deeply about, I'm going to let it go right now, with the knowledge that, oh, it will also be here tomorrow, and it will still be good, and it will still be, you know, juicy and wonderful and delicious. So that yawn for me actually said it all, that here he was able to relax and say that he was going to be able to have this again. So go ahead, Stacey.
Sure, and I would add to that, I think it's really important to think of the session in a kind of an arc. So there are going to be those moments where I can support Avi in those to really get into those rich, deep emotions, but I also have to realize that there's a certain limit of time, and then I need to kind of bring him back and co-regulate with him and say, and help him then go back to the rest of his day. So that last song is really a song that has come to do that for him from at the end of every session. And we could play it and use it very differently, but it is a way to close the session and reconnect and have that moment to breathe before transitioning back to whatever he's going to next.
You know, and it's difficult for therapists and teachers and people working with kids when a kid leaves the school, for instance, and, you know, they've invested their passion and shared wonderful times and done great things together, and then the kid leaves, and staff sometimes feels really bereft when the kid is gone. And what I try to remind them is the beautiful things that you have done together continue to live. They live for that child, and it doesn't matter where the child goes. They will recall at some point, oh, that time in music therapy when Stacey and I were singing together, oh, she cared about me. Someone cared about me. And that allowed me to feel that for myself. So it's really a process for everybody. You know, these DIR relationships and music therapy relationships are relationships. They aren't, I'm leading you somewhere. I'm standing next to you and we're going on a journey together. I happen to have been some places you haven't yet, but you and I are going together. And so kids and adults can take that in and say, oh, I know how to do this now. It's really a beautiful thing. And I think that's what was going on for him. Does that answer it at all for you, Sonny?
Any other questions?